Right.
This is about roles that were made for people of my stature that don't have the chance to go out for other roles normally.
But you, James Bond, you want to stop Dylan getting a role in a Hollywood film.
I am not going to get into an attack on a dwarf.
You don't want a dwarf actor to land a role playing a dwarf part.
Listen, a dwarf can play a dwarf part, but I think it's important to change narratives that don't fit in today's society. And really, it might be better. Narrative? It might be better if dwarves just exist in normal roles everywhere, because they do exist.
What was so bad about the way dwarves were depicted in Snow White? Have I missed something?
So, folks, we need to react today to, frankly, what is one of the funniest debates I think I've ever seen, where this annoying liberal guy gets absolutely destroyed by a literal dwarf, okay, as you see on your screen here. Now, look, I'm not here to be ableist. We love dwarves. We love hornswoggle. But to the liberal guy, it's really not a good look, right? How do you get absolutely mogged in a debate physically and intellectually by a literal dwarf? Okay, it is kind of funny, right? But just to give you the context here of what this is all about, Disney is doing a live action remake of Snow White, right? Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And they're recasting the dwarf actors as just regular sized people. Right? So dwarves are real human beings, right? As you can see on your screen, there's a real condition called dwarfism. And instead of just casting real dwarf actors, because after all, right, it's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, they're basically appropriating dwarf culture or whatever you want. You know, they're doing dwarf blackface by recasting the dwarves as regular people. And this liberal guy goes on and says, this is good because it's not offensive and blah, blah, blah. I'm British. And then Piers Morgan brings on an actual dwarf actor, Hornswoggle, who says, no, that's stupid. You're erasing opportunities for actual dwarf actors and actual, you know, because they care about it so much, actual inclusivity, right, and representation. And so check this out. This is, like I said, one of the funniest things I think I've ever seen, but let's get into it today.
Well, joining me is Dylan Posel, who played Hornswoggle, the leprechaun in WWE between 2006 and 2016, and by the podcaster and commentator James Barr. All right, James, you've got no problem with what Disney are doing. You think this is progressive and inclusive, and all those moaning about it should shut up.
I think you should live in the 1930s, actually, Piers, because that's where you belong, really, listening to what you were just saying then. Also, I'm going to quote Warwick Davis, because he said he finds
Okay, wait, hold right off the gate. You're living in the 1930s by saying that a role called The Seven Dwarves should be played by dwarves, okay? It doesn't make any sense.
Patronizing when people are offended on his behalf. And you've just spent a 5-minute monologue being offended on his behalf. And I think that's ridiculous.
Well, let me bring in Dylan, because Dylan is also offended, and he happens to be a dwarf actor. Dylan, I've got to say, I was very curious when I saw what Peter Dinklage came out and said, because I did wonder who appointed him the head of the dwarf actor community. And it turns out nobody did other than him. And the people who, it seems to me, who've really suffered in all this are the 6 dwarf actors who would have expected to have roles in this remake, in a massive Hollywood blockbuster, who are now not going to have that experience, or the money, or the fame that may have come with that.
Exactly.
What is your response to that?
So it's not a progression at all to me. My issue with it is exactly what you said. There are actors, dwarf actors, that that dream to be in a major motion picture such as this Disney remake. And now, because Peter Dinklage said what he said last year, now it's taken away. And it's taken away because of quote-unquote progression and all that. And it's not right, because these are roles made for actors of my stature, roles that aren't ever really given. I can't go out for the Harrison Ford or the George Clooney roles, because that's not for me. These dwarf roles are for people of my stature. And now it's taken away. I don't feel that's right. And not only that, but now think about the additional stunt actors or body doubles or that. Now you're talking multiple actors of my stature that don't get these major roles. And why? What's the reasoning? Because we're supposed to be progressive and we're supposed to just not view them as that.
Well, you know the
these
irony.
Were heroes. All of these dwarves, all of these dwarves took care of Snow White.
Exactly.
They all had characteristics, separate characteristics. They weren't these cave-dwelling monsters that people speak of. They all had 7 different characteristics for 7 different actors.
So on so many levels, it's just ridiculous. You know, yes, it's a positive role. And look, my take on it is that we just shouldn't even change movies in any way because they're offensive, right? I just think that's stupid. But even from the argument that they want to make all the time about inclusivity and representation and all of that, that doesn't make sense either. Because it would be like, imagine if the movie was called Snow White and the 7 Gay Black Women, okay? And they recasted all the gay black women as straight white men. How would Hollywood feel about it? Oh no, my gosh! But they're like actually appropriating the dwarves here, replacing the dwarves, real dwarves like our guy Hornswoggle here, okay, our king. And, you know, the James Barr here is going to come in and try to defend it. It's not defensible. It doesn't make any sense.
I completely and utterly agree with you. And the irony is that they profess, these progressives, to want to do this to protect you, right? They protect dwarf actors from being, you know, somehow smeared. But you don't feel that way at all.
Exactly.
Peter Dinklage spoke up about this. And that was my issue. He had in the past no issue cashing checks that were made for dwarf roles like Elf and all of that. Yes, he blew away the barriers when he did his roles that weren't necessarily made for a dwarf. But the Elf role was made for a dwarf. That check cleared just fine. So now that he's gone and done that, the progression of dwarf actors, it just doesn't sit right with me.
No,
this guy who is exactly what you said, what gave him the voice for all of our community?
Yeah.
Why?
I was honest. I think
a complete hypocrite. Let me bring James back in. So
when
James,
Piers Morgan is agreeing with you, I think you need to be concerned. I'll say that for the.
So you're telling the dwarf actor what he should feel.
Exactly. When Piers Morgan agrees with you. Oh yeah, Piers Morgan. You mean the guy who's like a moderate and fence sits on every single issue? How dare he agree with Piers Morgan? Okay, if he is not agreeing with you, apparently the passive aggressive, zesty liberal individual. How dare you?
And
having literally just
this guy speaks for the dwarves, okay?
Apparently, about speaking for someone in the dwarf community, Warwick Davis. You now accuse a dwarf actor.
No, it's not what I said. I said that if you're siding with anyone, you've got to worry. Right. What I'd like to say actually is that I kind of mostly agree with what you're saying.
That's not what you said.
Sir, that's just taking a pot shot there.
No,
it
is absolutely taking a pot shot. But I do agree with what you're saying. I completely agree with your point of view, and I think that's really important. But I can only speak from my experience, and as a gay man, I know that growing up, I witnessed gay people being villains in movies when I was
7 dwarves aren't villains.
Exactly.
I think stereotypes are really important to
What stereotype do you think they represent?
In the universe.
And by the way, remember what this guy said in the beginning of the debate? He said, Piers Morgan, stop getting offended on the dwarves' behalf. And what is he doing now? He's getting offended on the dwarves' behalf, literally.
Snow White, wouldn't it be better
if dwarves this is... This isn't a part of this about the stereotype.
Right.
This is about roles that were made for people of my stature that don't have the chance to go out for other roles normally.
But you, James, you want to stop Dylan getting a role in a Hollywood film.
I am not going to get into an attack on a dwarf.
You don't want a dwarf actor to land a role playing a dwarf part.
Listen, a dwarf can play a dwarf part, but I think it's important to change narratives that don't fit in today's society. And really,
Which is that narrative?
What are you even saying, dude?
If dwarfs just exist in normal roles everywhere because they do it.
He's not saying it because he knows there's nothing he can say because you have an actual dwarf actor speaking for other dwarf actors saying this is taking an opportunity away from us. By the way, that argument makes perfect sense, right? They're dwarves and you're casting them as real people. That's not helping dwarf representation, which you got so much about, right? So all he's doing now is just making excuses and spewing nonsense. And
what was so bad about the way dwarves were depicted in Snow White? Have I missed something?
Well,
nothing's bad about it. Exactly.
That's what I'm kind of wondering.
I don't represent Disney, but I'm just saying I think I see their point of view.
What's their point of view? What was so bad about the depiction of the dwarves?
Why are you so upset about a movie changing with the times and moving forward.
Because I think
you're the one who's upset about it.
There is real news we could be discussing.
No, but this is real news if you're a dwarf actor who are now out of work.
True.
Because of virtue signaling idiots.
But you're just
who think
using
that
this-
everything has to be rewritten
You are just
to be
using Dylan
inclusive,
as a cheap
when in
shot.
fact it's not inclusive at all.
No, you're using Dylan as a cheap shot to attack a Wokey. That's
I don't think
happening.
Dylan feels I'm using him as a cheap shot. And what I would
So
say
bringing him in to share his perspective is being used as a cheap shot. Yeah, how dare we, you know, they always talk about representation, right? But suddenly, how dare you bring in an actual dwarf to discuss a movie and a political debate over dwarfs? Yeah, how dare you do that? How dare we only need woke gay guys, okay? Only woke gay guys can speak, okay? For all of these different, for the dwarf community, for the black community, only woke gay guys can speak.
this.
Apparently.
I have spent the last year listening to people tell me only gay actors should play gay parts. Only Welsh actors, so Michael Sheen, should play Welsh characters, and so on and so on and so on.
Conversations are nuanced.
But the moment we have dwarf roles, which are the most famous dwarf roles in Hollywood history, then the only people apparently who can't play them are dwarf actors.
Exactly.
And I see
It
there
doesn't even make sense.
Here,
woke hypocrisy.
It has not changed. It was a cartoon. Those weren't actually dwarfs in the movie. They were drawn, okay? So firstly...
They were drawn as dwarfs.
No, that
Correct.
is...
But it's a
Yes,
story
exactly.
about dwarves.
Well, they
It's a
shouldn't be
story
called that.
about
They should be
dwarves.
called...
They shouldn't be called dwarves.
No, they should be called people with
They shouldn't be
dwarfism.
called.
What's wrong with being
They shouldn't
called
be called
dwarves?
dwarves.
Nothing, but that's not the correct
That's the
term.
story.
Dylan,
Exactly,
apparently
that's the
you're not
story.
allowed to
No,
call
you're
yourself
gonna call
dwarves.
himself whatever.
Apparently, Dylan, you're not allowed to call yourself dwarves, apparently.
I would love to hear, what should I call myself, sir?
I think you should call yourself whatever you feel comfortable with, but as a person...
He calls himself a dwarf.
Well, that's
A
great. then.
dwarf.
Good for you.
Correct.
I'm happy.
So now, sir, let me pause that. So it shouldn't be called Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It should
Listen,
just be
I
called
do not want to
Snow
get
White.
cancelled
So are you
because I
saying-
think your point of view is more important than mine right now. But what I'm annoyed about is Piers trying to take a cheap shot at someone
You
that
don't wanna get
believes in
cancelled. That
society
tells you a
moving
lot.
forward.
Yeah, I'm actually
Because really, if we
I'm
were to-
actually exposing the hypocrisy
It's
of the
not-
woke mentality of only gay people can play gay parts, only trans actors can play trans parts, and so on and so on and so on.
I think we would
right
get
to the
to a
point,
place where
right to the
everyone
point.
can play
Snow
every
White and the
role.
Seven Dwarfs has to be cancelled because you're not allowed to have dwarf
You
actors.
should be happy, Piers, because
Right.
it means that now you can play your dream role of Grumpy.
I would love to play Grumpy. I loved all the dwarves in that movie. They were great. Let me ask
now
you,
you're
guys.
being a hypocrite.
guys,
You'd love
here's-
to play
here's-
Grumpy, but
no,
you're
no,
taking
no,
a role
no.
away from a dwarf
The issue
actor.
at hand.
It's obviously a joke, Dingus. Okay, I mean, obviously comedy is not known to these people. But he's obviously joking. Okay. Anyways, let's skip ahead a little bit here, more towards the end, so we can kind of wrap it up. But check it out.
Go. Oh, you got to go back to 1930s.
No.
James. If you agree with what I'm saying, you
I
can't
agree with what
get
you're
on
saying. I
Pierce's
don't agree
case
with
and
anything
say-
that Piers.
Yeah, here's the thing, Dylan.
But they're saying the same thing. They're saying the same exact
He
thing.
said he literally just said what I said, James.
Dylan,
Right.
just to be clear, he doesn't agree when I say it, but when you say it, he agrees.
Because you're not
And
a dwarf.
That's
that
logical.
right now, I'm not a dwarf, no. But that right there is
Neither are you, by the way. Okay, so neither are you. So why are you speaking up about this? You're not a dwarf either. It doesn't make any
of the woke
sense.
brigade. Dylan,
Okay. So let me
just say, Dylan, I've got to let go,
Pierce,
unfortunately.
Real quickly, please. Pierce, quickly.
Final word, Dylan.
Pierce wrote James. Let me ask you this. So if a writer writes a piece on what I'm saying, is it wrong of them? Because essentially, that's the same as the words coming out of my mouth.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
but you're not saying that I am a woke hypocrite, and Piers is, and that's what I disagree with.
no.
Because I'm absolutely not.
You are.
So when I'm saying that I
agree with
disagree
you,
with Piers,
we've got to
nothing to do with your.
We're going to leave it there. Just to be clear, Dylan, he disagrees with what I say, but when you say exactly the same thing, he completely agrees with it.
You're
And
so
that is
annoying.
James Barr, right to a
That
T.
is
Dylan,
nonsense.
fantastic having you on Piers Morgan Uncensored. You did such a brilliant job in highlighting
He did.
why this is so
Let's go,
ridiculous.
Hornswoggle. Let's
Shame
go.
on Disney, and I hope you get another brilliant role very soon. I really do.
Well, I hope so too, and I hope that this really kind of resounds with how I feel.
Yeah.
And I don't speak for the whole dwarf culture and community, but this is literally
Piers
how
does.
I feel.
Piers Morgan speaks for the entire
Dylan,
dwarf community.
I've got to leave it there, Dylan.
He speaks
Thank
for
you.
all of you.
Thank you,
So
Dylan, for
that's-
joining me. James,
that's helpful, I think.
Thank you for joining me because
so welcome.
you came on and you beautifully highlighted the shocking
hypocrisy of
hypocrisy
woke culture.
of
Yes.
your culture.
Yes, you did.
Absolutely.
All right, folks. So there's the Piers Morgan debate between Hornswoggle and James Barr. It's just hilarious because the whole time James Barr, the liberal, has nothing to say, right? He's just spewing nonsense the whole time. And he can't really say anything because you have an actual dwarf here saying, yeah, I want to be represented as a dwarf in the movie, and explaining all the reasons why even the stereotype of the dwarves in the movie is not harmful or bad or in any way. But so the whole time he's just like, But you agree with Piers Morgan? But he has nothing to say. He has nothing to say because it is ridiculous. It's silly, right? If the movie's called Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, I personally think it should be dwarves that play the roles, right? But especially if it's an argument over inclusivity, representation, accurate representation, right? Because that's why they say blackface is wrong. That's why, they talk about all this stuff. But, suddenly the dwarves want to be represented, and apparently you can't do that. I don't know. Free the dwarves. Okay, we stand for dwarf rights. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. And until next time, folks, Alpha Moves only. God bless. Have a very good day, and peace.